Welcome, learner, to today's custom-tailored deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us. I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine a guy who, spends his entire life just studying the stars and philosophizing.
Right, the classic head in the clouds thinker.
Exactly. And he gets relentlessly mocked by all his neighbors for being totally broke. They're basically telling him his intellect is completely useless in the real world.
Yeah, that he's wasting his time.
Right. So this guy looks at the stars, predicts this remarkably heavy olive harvest months before it even happens, and he quietly buys up the leases on every single olive press in the region. And he does this in the dead of winter when they're cheap.
Which is just a brilliant business move, honestly.
It really is, because when the harvest hits and everyone is desperate to make oil, he holds a total monopoly, he charges whatever he wants, makes an absolute fortune, and proves a point. Thinkers can easily get rich, they just, have different priorities.
That is the story of Thales the Milesian. It's one of the most vivid anecdotes in the text we are exploring today, and I just love how perfectly it sets the stage for us.
Yeah, it really does.
Today we are looking at excerpts from Aristotle's Politics, specifically the Sheba Blake Publishing Edition.
And our mission today is to unpack this text, not as some dusty ancient historical artifact, but as a remarkably gritty, highly practical manual on human behavior.
Absolutely.
We're going to explore the ancient mechanics of hustle culture, the biological reasons we actually form cities, the mathematical failures of utopian communes, and even the collective wisdom of crowds.
It's a lot to cover, but the foundational idea Aristotle introduces here, really the premise that builds everything else, is that the city-state is not some artificial invention.
Right, because today, we tend to think of governments as contracts. Like people were living out in the woods, they got tired of being attacked by bears or whatever, so they signed a social contract to protect each other.
Yeah, the classic social contract theory. But Aristotle completely rejects that. He argues the state is actually a biological inevitability.
He maps it out almost like an evolutionary progression. You start with the most basic human pairing, which is the family.
Right, and the family only exists to handle immediate daily needs of survival. Food, warmth, basic shelter.
But families reproduce, they branch out, and eventually you get a village, which is really just a collection of descendants from that original family.
Exactly. And the village can handle slightly more complex needs. You start seeing some division of labor. But then comes the final evolution.
The city.
Yes. When multiple villages merge to the point where they are entirely self-sufficient, where they literally no longer rely on outside help to survive, you reach the level of the city or the state.
And there's that great line where he says, the state comes into existence merely for the sake of life, but it continues to exist for the sake of the good life.
I love that distinction. We survive in the village, but we flourish in the city.
Which ties directly into his famous claim that humans are, by nature, political animals. People quote that all the time, right?
Oh, constantly.
But they usually use it to mean we enjoy arguing about elections on the internet.
Right. But Aristotle's reasoning is entirely rooted in biology and language. He makes this hard distinction between having a voice and having speech.
Yeah, unpack that for us, because I think that's crucial.
So consider a dog or a horse. They have voices. A voice is basically a biological tool to indicate pleasure or pain. If a dog is injured, it yelps. If it's happy, it barks.
That's the limit of a voice.
Exactly. Humans, on the other hand, possess speech. Speech is this incredibly complex evolutionary tool designed to articulate what is useful and what is harmful.
And that ultimately allows us to discuss what is just and unjust.
Precisely. You cannot build a society on grunts of pleasure and pain. The entire concept of a city requires a shared understanding of justice.
Because we are the only animals equipped with the biological hardware to actually debate justice, which is speech, we are the only animals physically designed to form states.
And to really understand the depth of this, we have to look at Aristotle's teleological view of the world.
Teleology, meaning the study of a thing's ultimate purpose, right?
Right, its end goal.
Yeah.
To Aristotle, the nature of something is what it looks like in its most perfect, completed state. Like, the nature of an acorn is the towering oak tree.
Oh, I see.
Therefore, the nature of a human being is not a solitary hunter-gatherer just trying to survive out in the wilderness. Our natural, completed state is functioning within a complex moral community.
Which totally brings up that really intense stone hand analogy from the text.
Oh, that is such a powerful image.
Yeah, Aristotle basically argues that an individual who's completely isolated from society is essentially no longer human. He compares that person to a severed hand made of stone.
A stone hand, right.
A stone hand might have the shape of fingers and a thumb, but without the central nervous system of the body to actually animate it, it can't perform the function of a hand. It's literally just a piece of rock.
The implication there is just profound. If the city is our literal natural body, an individual who actively refuses society isn't just, a rebel.
Right.
In Aristotle's framework, they're either a beast or a god. They operate entirely outside the human condition.
Wow. Okay, so if we accept that the state is this living biological organism, we have to recognize that organisms require calories.
Right.
They need sustenance to survive.
They absolutely do.
So moving from the philosophical origins of the city to the practical reality of keeping it alive brings us straight into economics.
Yeah.
How do we actually manage the resources of this body?
Well, the text draws a very sharp, basically uncompromising line between two types of wealth management.
Okay.
The first is economy, which is a word that originally just meant household management. And the second is money getting, which is the pursuit of wealth for its own sake.
Household management represents natural wealth. And the defining characteristic of natural wealth is that it has a strict mathematical limit.
Yes. It consists of the tangible tools, the food, the clothing, all the provisions a family actually needs to function and live a good life.
Right. Once your pantry is fully stocked, your roof is secure, and your immediate needs are met, you just stop accumulating. The goal has been achieved.
Unnatural wealth, however, operates totally differently. Retail trade and usury fall into this category, and they have no natural limit.
Yeah, he got hard after usury, right?
Right. Aristotle is incredibly aggressive in his critique of usury, the practice of lending money at interest. The Greek word for interest is tokos, which literally translates to offspring or breeding.
Breeding money. He found the entire concept of tokos totally repulsive. Because, money was invented merely to solve a logistical problem in trade. If I have shoes and I need wheat, it's really hard to figure out the exact exchange rate.
Right.
So money is just a neutral medium to facilitate that trade. It was never meant to be treated like livestock that breeds and multiplies.
Making money reproduce itself fundamentally violates its intended purpose. Aristotle argues this creates a really dangerous psychological trap.
How so?
Well, when the means of living the currency becomes the ultimate end goal of living, human behavior begins to warp. This limitless pursuit of cash basically strips human virtues of their actual purpose.
Oh, like the medical profession example in the text.
Yes, perfect example.
The virtue of a doctor is the ability to heal the sick. But when a society becomes obsessed with limitless wealth, the doctor applies their medical skill not to heal, but simply to maximize billing. The virtue gets hijacked by the desire for profit.
And we see this warning personified in the fable of King Midas, which Aristotle references specifically.
Yeah, Midas.
Midas prayed that everything he touched would turn to gold. The gods granted his wish, and he promptly starved to death. He had infinite unnatural wealth, but he couldn't eat gold. He lost sight of what wealth was actually for.
I do want to challenge Aristotle's utter disdain for the merchant class here, though. It feels like a very aristocratic view, looking down on the people who actually run the trade networks that keep these cities fed.
That's a fair point.
Is he essentially just attacking ambition? We started this deep dive with the story of Thales cornering the market on olive presses. Doesn't that prove that understanding markets and pursuing profit requires intense intellect?
Well, the Thales story is actually Aristotle's way of balancing the scales a bit. He includes it to show that philosophers are entirely capable of playing the market and winning.
Right, if they want to.
Exactly. The intellectual mechanics of monopolies and trade are sound. Aristotle's target isn't the act of trading itself. His target is the obsession with accumulation.
Yeah.
He fears a society where every citizen's primary waking thought is simply increasing their ledger balance because that society will inevitably cannibalize itself.
Okay, so if limitless private accumulation is a disease that cannibalizes the state, it raises a pretty obvious question. Should we just abolish private property altogether?
The utopian question.
Right. If money is the problem, maybe the utopian ideal is a society where nobody owns anything. And this is exactly the debate Aristotle enters into with his teacher, Plato.
Yes. Plato's Republic famously outlined a utopian vision where unity was the absolute highest good. To achieve this perfect unity, Plato argued that the guardian class of the city should basically share everything.
Not just land and wealth, right?
Right, even wives and children. The theory was that if everyone owned everything collectively, poverty and jealousy would just vanish, and the city would operate as a single, harmonious family.
I mean, it sounds beautiful on paper.
It does.
But Aristotle looks at this blueprint and delivers one of the most devastatingly pragmatic rebuttals in philosophical history. He basically states, what is common to many is taken least care of.
The mechanics of human attention simply do not support universal ownership. Aristotle argues that people naturally care most for what is personally theirs.
Yeah.
They care a lot less for what they hold in common, or they only really care about it to the extent that it personally affects them.
Think about a shared office refrigerator.
Oh, that is the perfect modern equivalent.
Right. In theory, a communal fridge is a perfect utopian system. Everyone has equal access. Everyone can store their lunch. But in reality, nobody takes responsibility for cleaning out the expired yogurt.
Never.
Because it belongs to everyone, it effectively belongs to no one. If you scale that office fridge dynamic up to thousands of acres of agricultural land or, raising an entire generation of children, the neglect becomes catastrophic.
Aristotle actually points out that if a man has 1,000 communal sons, he doesn't love 1,000 sons. He effectively ignores all of them, assuming someone else will step up to parent.
It's basically an early articulation of what modern economists call the tragedy of the commons.
Exactly. Aristotle insists that you cannot legislate human nature out of existence. The goal of a state shouldn't be to eliminate self-love, but to channel it properly.
And to prove his point, he moves from Plato's theoretical utopia to the very real constitution of Sparta.
Yes. Sparta is fascinating because they actually did try to engineer a hyper-disciplined communal military state.
Right.
But Aristotle breaks down how their system of property ownership fundamentally eroded their military power from the inside out.
Yeah, the mechanism behind Sparta's decline was their inheritance laws. Over time, property in Sparta became concentrated into fewer and fewer hands.
He specifically notes that women owned roughly 2/5 of the land, largely due to massive dowries, and the simple fact that male heirs were constantly dying in battle.
And the economic reality of a Spartan soldier, a hoplite, was that they had to produce a certain amount of food from their own land to contribute to the communal military mess halls.
Right, the Syssitia.
Yeah, so if you couldn't pay your grocery bill to the mess, you literally lost your citizenship and your place in the phalanx. So, as the land consolidated into the hands of a few wealthy estates, thousands of Spartan men became too poor to qualify as soldiers.
It's wild. Aristotle points out that a state capable of fielding 10,000 soldiers eventually fielded fewer than 1,000 simply because of wealth inequality.
The state nearly collapsed, not because of an invading army, but because a few people hoarded the means of participation.
Exactly. And he also critiques Carthage, a state he generally admired for its stability.
What was the flaw in Carthage?
Well, their highest political offices effectively required the candidate to be wealthy. The moment a society makes wealth a prerequisite for leadership, they signal to the public that money is more valuable than virtue.
You end up with leaders who buy their positions and then just expect to make a profit off their public service.
Exactly. Aristotle's solution to all of this is private property, but paired with a strong culture of liberality.
So you allow people to own their farms and their wealth because ownership motivates them to maintain it.
Right.
But you educate them to be generous. Because, you can't practice the virtue of generosity if you don't actually own anything to give away.
Private property provides the canvas on which human virtues like charity, temperance, and hospitality are actually practiced.
That makes a lot of sense. So, if the ideal state relies on citizens owning property and practicing virtue, we have to define who gets to be a part of this system, who actually counts as a citizen.
And Aristotle's definition is incredibly strict. It completely ignores the criteria we use today.
Yeah, residence is entirely irrelevant to him. You can live within the city walls your entire life as a slave, an artisan, or a foreign merchant and never be a citizen.
Even legal rights don't make you a citizen. You can have the legal right to sue someone in a local court because your home country signed a trade treaty with the city, but that doesn't make you a citizen either.
So what does?
For Aristotle, true citizenship is defined by one specific metric: active participation in the judicial and deliberative offices of the state.
Meaning you have to physically sit on the juries that decide legal disputes, and you have to sit in the assembly that debates and votes on state policy.
Yes. Citizenship is an action, it is not a status.
But wait, this raises a massive logistical and philosophical problem. If citizenship requires active participation in running the government, why in the world would you want thousands of average, uneducated farmers making complex legal and military decisions?
It sounds like a recipe for disaster, right?
Totally. Wouldn't it be safer to put the power exclusively in the hands of a few brilliant experts?
Well, Aristotle wrestles with this exact question, and his answer is the concept of the wisdom of the multitude.
Okay, tell us about that.
He argues that while any single commoner might be prone to poor judgment, the collective public possesses an immense aggregate wisdom that often surpasses the smartest individual expert.
The analogy he uses in the text is a potluck dinner. He argues that a public supper where everyone brings a single dish is vastly superior to a meal paid for and cooked by one person.
Think about the mechanics of a potluck versus a catered meal. A single chef, no matter how skilled they are, is limited by their own palate and their own experiences.
Right.
But when 100 people each bring their best family recipe, the resulting feast contains a diversity of flavors and nutrients that one person could basically never produce alone.
And Aristotle applies this logic directly to the evaluation of music, poetry, and political leaders.
Exactly. One person might judge the rhythm of a poem, another the emotion, another the historical accuracy. Together, their collective judgment is incredibly accurate.
But wait, if a citizen is simply someone who actively participates in this collective system, does that mean being a good citizen is the exact same thing as being a good man? Like, if I do my jury duty and vote in the assembly, am I automatically a morally good person?
The text makes a really profound distinction here. They are not the same.
All right.
The virtue of a good man is absolute. A morally good man is guided by universal truths, regardless of where he lives. But the virtue of a good citizen is entirely relative to the specific constitution of the state they live in.
Because their primary job is the preservation of their specific state.
Exactly. A good citizen in a rigid oligarchy acts to preserve the oligarchy. A good citizen in a democracy acts to preserve the democracy. Their virtue is defined by their utility to the system.
Interesting.
Furthermore, Aristotle insists that a truly great citizen must master two opposing skills. They must know how to rule, and they must know how to be ruled.
Just like the military. I mean, a brilliant general who has never served as a private, who has never had to actually obey a difficult order under pressure, will fundamentally misunderstand the men he is commanding.
You have to experience submission to authority before you can responsibly wield it.
Right. So because the definition of a good citizen is entirely dependent on the specific type of government they live under, we really have to look at how Aristotle categorizes these systems of power.
Yes, he organizes every government into a simple matrix based on two questions. Who holds the power, and whose interest are they serving?
And this matrix is where his pragmatism really shines. There are three true forms of government where the rulers act for the common good of everyone in the city.
Right. If one person rules for the common good, that is a monarchy. If a small group of the best, most virtuous people rule for the common good, that is an aristocracy. And if the majority of the public rules for the common good, he calls it a polity, or a free state.
But human nature is flawed.
It is.
And every true form has a corrupted shadow version. These corruptions occur the moment the rulers stop prioritizing the common good and start using the state machinery to just enrich themselves.
So monarchy decays into tyranny, where one person rules entirely for their own benefit. Aristocracy decays into oligarchy, where a wealthy few rule just to protect their own assets.
And the final corruption, the shadow version of the free state, Aristotle defines as democracy.
Modern listeners often physically recoil at this classification.
Oh, absolutely. We use democracy as a synonym for liberty and equality.
Right, but we have to understand Aristotle's exact mechanical definition of the word. To him, a democracy is specifically a system where the poor majority rules exclusively for their own benefit at the direct expense of the wealthy minority.
It is institutionalized class warfare. He goes out of his way to clarify that the difference between an oligarchy and a democracy isn't actually about numbers.
No, not at all.
It's not simply the few versus the many. It is fundamentally about economics. Oligarchy is the rule of the rich. Democracy is the rule of the poor.
He even provides a hypothetical scenario to prove it. If a city somehow existed where a tiny minority of poor people held absolute power over a massive population of wealthy elites, Aristotle would still classify that government as a democracy.
Because the defining characteristic isn't the head count, it is the economic class wielding the power.
Exactly.
So looking at this matrix of monarchies, oligarchies, and democracies, the obvious question the learner might be asking is, which one is the best?
Well-
What is the ideal system we should be building?
But Aristotle rejects the premise of the question entirely.
Yeah. He recognizes that a city is not a monolith. It is an incredibly complex ecosystem made up of farmers, mechanics, wealthy merchants, and soldiers.
Forcing a single theoretical perfect government onto every society is like a doctor prescribing identical medication to every patient, regardless of their actual disease.
Right, it doesn't work.
Aristotle's ideal politician is a supreme pragmatist. They don't dream up a flawless city in the clouds. They look at the actual messy demographic reality of their specific population and prescribe a government that will create the most stability for them.
And the key to that stability, according to the text, is almost always the middle class.
The mechanism of the middle class is just brilliant in its simplicity. The extremely wealthy only know how to command, and they tend to do so with arrogance.
Yeah.
The extremely poor only know how to obey, and they do so with servility. If a city only consists of the rich and the poor, you don't have a state of free citizens. You basically have a state of masters and slaves.
And the middle class acts as the crucial buffer. They don't covet the wealth of the rich because their own needs are met, and they don't despise the poor. They just want institutional stability.
Exactly.
So, learner, as we pull all of these threads together, what does this journey through Aristotle's politics actually teach us?
Well, I think it shows that being well-informed means looking past the shiny, idealistic theories of perfect societies.
Yeah. It means acknowledging the biological reality that we are wired for community while also recognizing the dangers of endless wealth accumulation that just turns us into King Midas.
Right. It means understanding why utopian office fridges fail, why the potluck of the crowd possesses real wisdom, and why the best political systems are built on pragmatic stability, not theoretical perfection.
And yet, even in the most stable, pragmatic systems, the underlying tension of human nature remains. Which brings us to one final, deeply unsettling story from the text.
Yes, it is a story about the intersection of power and exceptionalism.
Tell them the Periander story.
So Aristotle recounts the legend of Periander, an ancient tyrant who received a messenger from a fellow ruler. The ruler was asking for advice on how to manage his city.
Okay.
Periander never spoke a single word to the messenger. Instead, he led the man into a field of corn. As they walked through the crop, Periander silently used his staff to strike off the heads of every single stalk of corn that grew taller than the rest.
He just walked through, cutting them down.
Right, until the entire field was perfectly level. The messenger returned and reported that Periander had basically lost his mind and was destroying his own crops.
But the fellow ruler understood the silent advice perfectly, didn't he?
He did. To maintain control of the state, you must systematically cut down the most prominent, exceptional men in the city.
This was the ancient justification for ostracism, the practice of literally banishing citizens who became too virtuous, too wealthy, or too popular.
The logic was that extreme inequality of any kind, even an inequality of goodness, threatened the stability of the state. If someone was too exceptional, they were no longer a citizen, they were a threat to the system.
And this is the thought we want to leave you with today, learner. We like to think we have evolved past the brutal pragmatism of the ancient world.
We really do.
But look around at our modern institutions, our corporations, and our politics. When someone in our society becomes incredibly successful, undeniably brilliant, or vastly outshines the rest of the field, what is our actual response?
Yeah, that's the real question.
Is our natural biological political instinct to elevate them? Or, deep down, do we still look for ways to cut down the tallest stalks in the field to protect the comfort of the status quo? It is a question that cuts right to the heart of what it means to be a political animal.
Something for you to mull over.
Mm-hmm.
Until our next deep dive.